In conversation with Christine Ricketts. Christine Ricketts studied literature at SUNY Purchase with a focus on medieval grey stories. Who doesn't like a good story about a knight meeting another random knight in the forest, kicking his ass, only to realize later it is his third cousin twice removed? When she's not jaunting through the 16th century, Christine is reading and writing about dragons and spaceships, though usually not at the same time. Usually, in the real world, Christian currently jots metadata at a test prep publisher in New York City. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today, Christine Rickett. How are you doing, Christine?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fine too. I must say, it's such a pleasure, really, to have you on the show today. I love your energy and the vibe you've had before we started. Nice one.
Yes, I'm
Thank you.
excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Christine, I want to first say that I was impressed and very impressed actually, reading through the description page of your queer team science fiction novel in the name of the sheep. And I would like to ask you, how does this book come about? What inspired you to write The Sheep?
Oh, I've always been a real big fan of space and sci-fi, though this is the first science fiction
Oh,
novel I've ever written.
wow.
But it's always been an interest of mine. And usually when I start writing a story, I start with a main character. And in this case, I was thinking about in science fiction novels and TV and movies, you're always seeing sort of someone who's very competent, who knows exactly what they're doing in the ship. And I thought, well, a ship's kind of like a car, right? And I own a car, but I don't actually know how the car works.
Wow.
I know where the gas goes. I know where the windshield washer fluid goes. I could probably change a tire, but
Oh,
the inner workings of it are pretty mystifying to me. And I kind of thought, well, what would it look like if I had a ship captain who didn't really know anything about their ship? They just knew how to fly it. And that's sort of the basis of Sam, the main character. And then from there, I went, okay, what's an interesting story about a ship captain, a spaceship captain? And I thought, well, how about her last job that she ever does?
wow.
And then I thought, well, why is it her last job? And I thought, well, she wants to retire. Why does she want to retire? And sort of et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I sort of write myself into the story.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful intro to me, actually. That sounds like a beautiful introduction into becoming a writer. Sounds like a lovely, quick in, an open door into becoming an author. And I love your description of the book. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. And for the sake of readers who haven't read the book yet, and of course, without giving much information away, could we have a sneak peek of what we had expect in terms of themes and subject lines picking up the sheep?
Well, ships, of course, spaceships, right there in the title, space. But in terms of themes, it's really actually a story about grief and overcoming grief and sort of how you can meet the people, how you meet the people that help you come out of a dark place that you're in, finding those friends or that found family that really pull you out of the dark place that you can go to when you've lost people that are really important to you.
Wow. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's an heavy team you've got in there. A heavy one.
It's heavy, but it's also a fun story. And I know those two things sound a little weird to have in the same story,
Yeah.
but it's it's a fun story that also tackles sort of some tough themes.
And the fact that it's also science fiction team too, it's something quite exciting to know about.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about the future that has so many possibilities that's just really exciting to tackle.
And something just came to my mind now. I wanted to ask you, how were you able to shuffle these teams together? Teams of the ones you've just mentioned, and the fact that it's science fiction. How were you able to shuffle it together in a way that an eventual lovely novel is formed eventually?
Well, it's sort of thinking about, taking something that I think everybody's has experienced, losing someone, and then just sort of imagining how that would unfold
Mm.
500 years in the future, what sort of how technology would shape that, how that would shape how we meet people, where we
Yeah.
go, the things that we're doing. And then sort of, the fun part is, the people that you meet, have so many different aspects to them and facets to them. And, they can really, it doesn't have to be a dark journey, people
Mm.
can really sort of pull you up, even though you're sad and dealing with sorrow.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing. I love your take on that. Thank you for sharing. Before I proceed, I'd like you to show the book to the camera, just so it's what it looks like. Beautiful cover you've got in there. Would you like to talk about the making of the cover? Because I'm seeing something that looks like a star in there, and something also beside the ship that looks like a
yeah,
space.
we have a planet here and we have a space station. And then this is the ship that the
Wow.
title is based on. I actually did this cover myself.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
it took a lot of iterations, but I finally got to a place where I was pretty happy with how it looks. But yeah,
Christine of many talents.
well, we can't all be singers.
We cannot all be singers.
Yeah,
That
my
was
singing voice no good.
that was funny. Thank you so much for sharing. I love the sound of that. Thank you. And Christine, one of the most interesting things to me as a writer is to listen to readers' feedbacks. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that make literature to be complex is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different people, different readers, based on their opinions. And sometimes the readers might get the message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far, I mean, several kilometers away, very extremely far from getting the message. And at most time, they might just hilariously misunderstand the message and interpret the book upside down. As interestingly fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel exactly when readers interpret your works differently than you intended? How does that make you feel?
I mean, I think in a lot of ways, reading is an engaging process. And
Mm,
I mean, the reader should be interpreting things in their
yeah.
way because as the writer, as the author, I've written a story and I have meanings that I want to convey.
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, I've written this story for me. This is a story I've written because I wanted to read it. But
yeah.
I don't expect every reader to pick up every meaning that I'm putting down or to even see it the same way that I do, because it's sort
Yeah.
of like writing's like creating a puzzle. Like, and I'm saying, this is how I think the puzzle should be laid out. This is the picture that I think it should form.
Mm,
What do you, as the reader, what picture do you make with these same puzzle pieces? And I think that's so fascinating when people can take those same pieces and go, well, actually, did you mean this? You could have meant this. And I thought, I could have meant it. I didn't think of it at the time, but I think, sometimes people give me interpretations and I'm like, I
wow.
wish I had thought of that.
Yeah.
That's even better than what I wrote. So I think it's wonderful when readers come up with their own sort of meanings because, every journey into reading is very personal. And I
Yeah.
love when they take different things out from it.
I love the fact that you mentioned that every journey to reading it's a personal one, and that's one of the things that make book clubs and book conversation to be quite interesting. If you're in a room and people are talking about a particular book that we've all read together, the way I would interpret the book would differ entirely to the way the next person would interpret the book, and to differ to the way the third person is gonna have a view of the book, and no same person interpret just like no same person have the same fingerprint. So it differs with people based on your own opinion, based on how the book could relate to you personally as a person, as an individual. Now you can be able to, conjoin together and bring out the meaning from within you. So, I think it's something quite exceptional, really, and something that makes literature to be quite fun as well. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, it's wonderful because you're seeing everybody's got a different journey in life. So they have different experiences, and that
Yeah,
comes through when they're reading.
yeah, yeah. I'd also like to ask you, Christine, what is your favorite piece of writing advice you've ever been given as a writer, and the least favorite one as well? Love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, my favorite one that I think about all the time is to always listen to criticism. Always listen when people are telling you this works or this doesn't work,
Mm,
but don't necessarily take that advice.
Wow.
because sometimes just because something doesn't work for somebody, one particular reader,
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's wrong or it's not right for your story.
Yeah.
As as the author, you're the driver of the train. You're
Absolutely.
the one who's like deciding where the story goes. But
Yeah.
it's so important to listen to what those people are finding
Mm.
because you never know when you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
So there's uh perspectives that you're not going to get if you don't pay attention to your readers like that.
Wow.
My least favorite advice is show don't tell.
Show that.
I
Wow.
Yeah, I think that advice has been beaten into the ground, and what tends to happen is writers tend to write these really long, involved, descriptive passages, and I'm like, I got about two sentences into that and then just skipped because, I'm not noticing everything in the real world. When I'm walking around, in life, I'm not noticing every little tiny detail. So why am I going to know? Why would your characters notice it in a story? Why would I know? Why would I want to read about it in a story? So I really like when the authors leave a little bit for me to be involved in.
Yeah. I love your take on that actually. I mean, it's quite exceptional. And I've been finding this conversation so far to be quite interesting and well educative. The answers you've given so far are well
Thank,
great. Thank you so much for sharing. And now
thank
I'd
you.
like us to transition a little bit into inspirations and ideas. I personally have always been fascinated by our authors, especially novelists like yourself, would sit down and craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentence come together to make paragraph and paragraph come together to make pages and pages come together to make chapters and chapters coalition going over and over and over again to make an amazing novel like you've just shown to the camera. And this always leaves me thinking, how exactly do they get the ideas and inspiration to craft these words starting from the sentence stage to the paragraph stage, to the pages stage, the chapter stage, that the story keeps transitioning beautifully without any sort of disparity and it's going on smoothly. And it's always leave me shocked and like, wow, how did they exactly do this? And as far as writing is concerned, I'd like to ask you too, how do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where did they come from? I'm
I
curious.
mean, really questions. When I start everything when I'm writing, it's really when I'm, following a character, I'm like, what are they thinking? And if they're thinking that, what are they doing then because of their thinking? And then
Mm.
when they're doing that, where are they going? Who are they talking to? Why are they talking to them?
Wow. Wow.
Every question that you ask is like another little line in that paragraph that you're building. And then the story is moving because you're following them, almost like a camera in a movie, right? You're
Mm.
panning in and just following them through the story. So that's how I sort of build my sentences and my paragraphs and my chapters is just one foot in front of the other, following in that character's footsteps.
Mm.
But in terms of like larger inspiration, I mean, just reading, watching movies, watching
Wow.
TVs, watching anytime you're ingesting another type of story, it's
Yeah.
another opportunity for you to go, oh, that makes me think of this. That makes me want to go down this path.
Yeah. I can relate to that too, especially even if you're watching movies or you're reading certain books or you're watching a documentary, yeah? Because I remember there's a time I watched a movie and I was compelled to write a poem after watching the movie. I was like, wow, this is very impressive. And it's more like an autobiography movie of someone who is very prominent, who is an activist. She's a lady, a woman rather. She has done quite a lot. I mentioned the name from Ransom Kuti. She has done quite a lot in Nigerian scene. So after watching the movie, it's more like I was reading a memoir. It was so compelling and very educative. So I felt compelled and I wrote a poem afterward. So I can relate to that when you say when you mentioned that it's something quite exceptional. And from speaking with quite a lot of people, I guess some people tell me, well, I get ideas from my dream, hilariously. I got ideas from stories of friends of friends of friends. I got ideas from things I've seen around me. I got ideas from my own personal life experiences. I got ideas from this and that and this. It's very diverse, very huge, and quite so many tempo and area where writers get the ideas and inspiration from. Thanks for sharing. I love yours. I love listening to yours. Really.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you too. Yeah. Thank you. And apart from the sheep, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
I've done a couple short story collections with some friends of mine,
Oh,
where we've sort of what we do is we each write a story, our own story, and then we pass those stories around, and then we write a story in response to other people's stories, sort of what in your story inspired something in me to then write a story. And then
mm,
we do that a couple different times, which is really fun because it's like, what part of my story did other writers think was the most interesting part that they could sort of take a thread and pull that thread out and go, well, here's another story, that you thought was just throwaway, but I thought was really interesting, and I want to really dive into that.
mm.
So I have about three collections of those, and then I am working on a sequel to the ship, but it is in pretty early stages. But that's where I'm sort of at in terms of current stuff.
Wow. That's amazing. That's lovely. I love your take on that. It sounds to be quite beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And I'd also like to ask you, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing this book and also ever since it got published?
Yeah, publishing is tough. This book I self-published. I
Oh,
did query it a lot for a couple years, and I got a little bit of interest, but nobody that really just said yes, which is
oh,
hard. It's a real kind of blow to your ego because you're thinking, oh, is this not any good? Is that why nobody wants it?
yeah.
And the truth is, publishing's a business.
Mm,
And a lot of times it doesn't have to do with how good of a writer you are or how good your story is. It's really about what they think is going to sell. So, really, the hardest thing I've found is to just keep reminding myself that it's not about my talent or about how good my story is. It's really about how do I get my story out, my novel out to people who are going to want to read it? Because there's so many readers in the world, and there's so many places where people want to read your story, but they might not have access to it.
yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge is how to keep going and how to reach a lot of people. So that's when things like doing an interview with your lovely show is just, a chance to say, hey, here's another audience that might be interested in this story.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love your take on that, and it's very true. Yeah, I find what you said to be quite very true, what we've shared so far. Thank you. And also, published author, so I'd like to hear your take on this. What sort of advice would you give a struggling writer who is still looking forward to getting his book out there into the publishing world? What would you advise people in this category?
To stick with it. You just got to keep sticking with it.
Mm.
I also work in publishing as I mentioned before, and
Oh,
I know, how hard it is. I know the people who are sort of in charge, who are looking at the books that they want to purchase. It's just a very commercial sort of space. So you have to really just have patience. You have to really believe in yourself, and you have to just keep working at it because you can get to a space where you're happy with what you put out in the world. And I mean, if you're set a goal to be a millionaire by the time you're 40 from your novel, you're probably going to be a little disappointed. But if you set a goal where you want people you've never met to read your book, or you want to see it on a bookshelf, or you want to see it on Amazon, that's very doable. That's an incredibly easy goal,
mm.
and it's very rewarding to see it happen.
That's amazing. I love your take on that. Thank you so much. And I'd like you to show the book again, once again, to the camera before we wrap up. Yeah, now I wanted to ask you, in case of some viewers who are currently watching the interview and would love to get a copy of the book, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
Well, they can go to Amazon. It's available in a lot of different Amazon stores, barnesandnobles.com, Kobo. You can check out my website. My website is www.cerickeetts.com. I have a bunch of links up there to the
Wow.
print book, the EPUB, even an audiobook if you want to hear
Mm.
me try and voice these characters that I've created.
Wow.
So a
Interesting.
lot of different ways to get it.
Yeah. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Christian Ricketts books directly on Amazon, on Barnes& and Nobles, on Kobo, on his website, and also on other platforms. I also left links to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Christine, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say it's more than awesome. Very great and lovely having this conversation with you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so great. I had enjoyed myself so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure as well. Thank you.